Parent Wins, an adventure of a lifetime. A global expedition dedicated to collecting stories of environmental and cultural preservation while conducting marine research aboard sailing vessel Resilience.
A big idea that has been building as we come into Maine is the connection of land and sea.
You know, when you're on the coast of Maine and you're seeing, white-tailed deer, or you might see a fox or something, but then you go 25 miles offshore and you get to that place where the water depth drops from 300 to 600 feet, and there's tremendous upwelling, and you have the fresh water coming in from land, and you have the cold water from the Arctic, and it's all mixing there, and all of a sudden you have 30 whales, and you have multiple species feeding, and you have hundreds of dolphins, and you have seals and porpoise, and it's kind of like the Serengeti. That we know that the rivers feed the ocean.
The rivers bring nutrients. They're nutrient highways from land to the sea.
We drove from Rockland up the coast, really up to the Penobscot River, and then along the Penobscot River, which is really neat because it was leaving the coast and seeing how the land changes. So we're driving from Rockland, Maine to Bangor, and we're actually following the Penobscot River all the way up to Bangor. We're headed to meet Zach, who's been helping us meet a lot of folks like all over the place. He's kind of one of those guys, it seems like he knows everybody. And now we finally get to meet him after talking to him for about a month regularly. And we went into Bangor and we met with a lot of really interesting people with various backgrounds, but all really with a connection and something really interesting to share about the Penobscot River and its connection to the sea, its connection to the land, its connection to history.
You can see the entirety of human history in Maine right there in the river. And that's because that river really didn't exist before the last ice age. This is a fairly new river. And about 25,000 years ago, we were under 2 miles of ice here. When it all melted, things got changed, and the river is part of that. So just about everything around Maine's human history revolves around rivers, but in particular, this one. And so whenever I look at this, I have such a sense of history. And so many of the place names, including the name of the river itself, are all indigenous names.
This is our traditional lands. We've never been defeated in war. We've never relinquished our rights to the land. And we still live here. All of this land that they've been using belonged to us until the land claims, but I still contend that it still belongs to us. So we've always lived here. And I went in the military, but for education. I didn't have guns. I had tools, pencils and notepad, and that's what I did. Then I used it for education, and I traveled. I didn't travel very far. They sent me back home. Spirits brought me back here in Bangor, and I was on that big set, worked on that sack base down there. It's probably significant, but Spirit brought me back home. I can't go away for very long, and it tells me to come back home, because I'm not finished here yet. Because a lot of these people during the land claims, they couldn't interpret any of the legal documents, And I could read them and understand them, but I had books that I could interpret what they were saying. Right. Then I had people that I could call and say, Zach, what does this mean? Right. And so it would be good if we could get along as one race of people instead of like now.
But the past has been pretty tough with development and land being taken and things changing over the years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's the big thing. You know, the jurisdiction of the land, and with the encroachment. And my father would tell me that up north of this island there, you could look far as you can look up north. There was no trees. They had cut it bald. They had cut it bald. Yeah. And when you were in Bangor, where, you know, you look around and you see a lot of them buildings, like where we had this morning, the coffee, you go just up over that hill and look around at the old buildings up there. They're old structures, architecture, and it was from the lumber era. You know, all these people come in here for that lumber. All the sawmills that used to be along the river here, cutting all of the trees. There used to be one right across the river here. Yeah.
Right where the dam is, where we had
Yeah.
lunch today.
Yeah, just where that island right there, that little point right over there, round. Yeah, there was this is Milford, and there was a sawmill down there, and that's where they sawed a lot of stuff. They used to flood the river with all of that.
The Penobscot River's the largest river in the area. It has a ton of history, and you know, to be able to see it from the lens of, you know, somebody like Dana, whose people have been there forever, and talk about that life and what that was, and the history between then and now, and really, I feel like in a way, maybe circling back to trying to return to that original health, that original ecosystem, that original relationship. We're always, as human beings, it seems, trying to innovate and trying to find efficient ways to do what we do. Especially now we're talking about, you know, finding efficient ways to create energy that isn't burning fossil fuels. Dams seem like a great solution to that. One of the problems with that is if you think about the river as a vein, you know, it is a flowing of life and sustenance. And it's not just one direction, as you might think too. It's not just coming into the ocean. There is a relationship of things coming up into the river as well. And you take that vein and you cut it off. All of a sudden, I mean, you're literally cutting off the flow of life. And we've just now, I think probably in the last decade, it's become sort of widespread conversation of rewilding rivers and removing these dams because we realize the problems that they've caused. I mean, totally changing entire ecosystems, and we found not for the better.
So the thing about the Penobscot watershed, and I think all of Maine especially, is that it's not so far gone. So that it doesn't take that, with just a little bit of help, the watersheds can come back, the fish can come back. It's because the upper headwaters are all forested. You know, this watershed is 90% forest. Some of it's, you know, working forest, but it's still fairly intact. And so those headwaters continue to supply clean, cold, fresh water to the lower reaches of the river. And so that makes it possible to do restoration actions and have them be successful. And so maintaining that good quality, maintaining intact forest is really important. And I had a couple grants to help with the Penobscot River Restoration Project. The proposal to remove 2 of the lowermost dams on the river had just been announced, and there was a lot of interest among scientists in making sure that we documented the impact of the dam removal.
Science is just catching up with indigenous knowledge of these ecological systems. You know, these people have been here observing for thousands of years, and so they do know their environment. Catherine talked about the logging industry in the 1800s and how one of the first formal complaint lodged against the dams were the Penobscot people. And there wasn't any action on that until 2013.
So where we are right now, there used to be a dam. This was the for a long time, the lowermost dam on the river or the first dam that salmon migrating from the ocean would have encountered. So all of these fish that are migrating in from the ocean, including salmon, they're bringing in ocean nutrients. The thing about salmon is that Atlantic salmon do not die after spawning. So unlike Pacific salmon, they'll actually survive and migrate out and do it all over again, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, which is even more amazing, the thought of making that journey not once, but multiple times in their life. And so certainly through their eggs and the ones that don't survive, they're contributing nutrients to inland forests.
You know, is it as simple as the goal is remove the dams and the salmon will come back? And is it as simple as that? What is everybody that's like fighting to like restore this this environment really fighting for? What's the end goal?
They're fighting for the fish back in the river. You know, they're fighting to have a more intact, healthier river system to restore an endangered species. And also, a lot of these fish support other wildlife. So there's definitely more osprey and eagles on the river. Some of these fish are not endangered and you can fish for. So if you go upriver, you can see people fly fishing for shad, lobstermen catching alewives to use for bait. So it sustains, it can really, you know, this river used to sustain communities. And I think the vision is that it could one day not just be a scenic backdrop, but actually give us food and give us sustenance.
If we don't have a vision of where we want to go, we're not going to be able to create that vision, right? So we have to be thinking about what does a positive vision and relationship look like how do I manifest that in my own life, but you know, and help it happen in society too.
So, you know, talking to somebody like Catherine, who's a scientist and science communicator and deep in the research, and you know, right now I'd say really amazing, effective boots on ground, making change because of the research she's doing, because of the communications she's doing. You take somebody like that and you take somebody like Dana who, you know, he is a representative and a holder of knowledge in the history of the Penobscot and of that area. You know, all these people, you know, whether it's talking about land rights or talking about, you know, preservation of or restoration of rivers, or you're talking about preservation of culture and fishing and the ability to hold on to a way of life. I love it because it's sort of like the river and the land that we're all sort of weaved together. We're all dealing with each other, but we're all also part of that ecosystem. We're all also tied in, and what one person does or what one community does affect the others.
If you want to access more content, consider joining our community on Patreon. You can find details in the video description. Thank you so much for watching.